Okay, good evening, YouTubers. We are back in the Chinook, and today we're in East Leeds Airport, which is south of Yorkshire and to the east of Leeds, obviously. Today I'm going to go and take a look at the battleground of the Battle of Towton. Now, I hear you say, where? Yes, I'll explain on the way. Let's get the show on the road. Brakes are off. Okay, let's get some power up. Here we go, all looking good, no warning signs. Take it into the hover. Heavy old bird this. Come on, up we go, there we go, there we go. Got it. Right, we are in the hover. Everything's looking good. There's no flashing lights and alarms and things. Right, let's get going. The Towton is over there. We need to fly west from East Yorkshire, coming round onto west. Now, quick rundown for those of you who have not heard of the Battle of Towton. The reason I particularly am interested in this place is because it has not changed. Battle was fought in 1461. Okay, it was one of the biggest medieval battles in British history, and the terrain has not changed. Okay, they've tarmacked the roads, that's about it. All the hills and fields. It was an agricultural spot at the time, and it still is. So you can put yourself right in the boots of the soldiers at the time, and you can see everywhere. It is a triangle. Okay, imagine a long, tall triangle, like a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you've got the village of Towton. Down the two steep sides of the pyramid, you've got two roads coming up from the south. And along the bottom, we've got a road that connects the two next to a village called Saxon. Okay, and this is where the village took, the battle took place. So the first thing that we're going to do, once we arrive, is we're going to fly around the triangle. So we're going to familiarize ourselves with the area that we're talking about, and then we're going to talk about the battle itself, where it started, where it finished, and where I think the mass graves, because it was alleged to have been an enormous battle, and the mass graves, they can't find anything, and that's because they're looking in the wrong place. And if you fly around the place by a helicopter, you'll see exactly where. It's quite obvious actually where it was, where the graves are. Right, here we are. This is the top of the triangle where the two roads come together in a fork, and this is the village of Towton. Okay, the battle was not fought here, it was fought to the south of Towton. There is a manor house, you see it in the trees there. That is where they were doing some building work, and they uncovered a grave of lots of people who had been clearly killed in combat. Okay, and that's what started the whole discussion, really, about the Battle of Towton. Excuse me. Right, so we're now going to fly south down the first road. There we are. This battle was fought between the Lancastrians and the Yorkists back in those days. Now, to the right of the road, there's a hill, as you can see, going down, and there's a river at the bottom of that hill where lots of dead people ended up. Okay, we'll come back to that later. Also notice that there is a because these fields haven't changed. The actual battle, according to the historians, was fought right there, just to my left, in the middle of that field between the two roads, and that's not actually true. It's not actually what happened. On this field here, see where the high ground and the trees at the end, this is where the Lancastrian army camped the night before. Okay, on this bit here, because they knew the army of the Yorkists was coming from the south, up one of the roads or the other, so they were here. Okay, and as it turned out, the Yorkists came up both roads. And then we've got the village of Saxon. So this forms the line across the bottom of the triangle. Okay, which we're going to cover now. Am I going the right way? Yes. So the Yorkists came up that road there, and they got the first contact with the Lancastrian army, which was camped on that hillside. Here's the village of Saxon. Now there are some noblemen who were in that battle who were buried in the graveyard, the churchyard here in Saxon. Okay, and you'll notice there's a bit of a dip here. Now this is where the battle actually took place, I reckon, because there's a high ground there which slopes down to the road, and then the high ground goes up again towards Towton off to my left. This is the bottom of the triangle, and as we come to the crossroads, we're going to fly up the other side of the triangle. Now the other Yorkist army came up this road again from the south until they got to here, when they could see the battle taking place where we've just flown over. According to me, and I've got this data from flying around the the battle site, and going right down to ground level. So we follow this back up, and this goes back to the village of Towton. Okay, so we're going to start by landing over where the Lancastrian army was encamped. And you see, none of this has changed. Obviously the roads have been tarmacked and there's street lighting and that, but there's not much else has changed. Now, historians believe the battle took place here, and it didn't. And I'll tell you why in a minute, and I'll demonstrate, I'll show you exactly why and where my reasoning is coming from. Okay, so it's all about high ground. Don't forget medieval battles, men in swords and horses and sledgehammers and things, and bashing the shit out of each other. So you're going to get really tired really quickly, and so having the advantage of high ground is going to help you to a tremendous advantage, because by the time someone's struggled up from the low ground to the high ground, they're going to be pretty exhausted, so they're going to be a lot more tired than you are. You're going to have to be super fit to be a fighting knight or a soldier or whatever in those days. So I'm going to land the helicopter at the end of this field where the trees are, because this is the campsite where the Lancastrian army lay in wait. So we will land down here so you can see what the soldiers saw. What they would have given for a Chinook, eh? For a bit of recce observation. But they didn't. They had men on horses as scouts in those days, and they would have come and rode to their leaders and told them what was going on. Now, they were expecting the army to come from the south. Now, unfortunately for them, it was a windy day and it was snowing. It was winter. The early part of the year, I think it was around March, something like that. I can't remember the exact date. So here's our army, and this is exactly where they were camped. Okay. So we're going to land the helicopter here and have a little look around to see what they can see. Now, we know this army is coming from the south, and the entire Lancastrian army was camped right here. So they were familiar with the terrain. They'd already been here for a little while. So I'm going to face the direction where the enemy soldiers were coming from. Okay, brakes are on. Right, so this is it. This is the encampment, and we know. So we'll have sent scouts out. Now look at the terrain. It's actually higher to our left. And our scouts have come and said there's an army coming up this road ahead of us. And so the first thing that they've done, the commanders here have said, well, let's move to the high ground, which is up there. to the left. So let's do that. Let's do that. And this is how the battle starts to take shape. And it's not quite the way the historians tell it. So you want the highest ground available. So I want to keep the helicopter quite low so that you can see the terrain as the soldiers will have seen it. So they're moving in an easterly direction towards the road, because soldiers don't necessarily have to stay on the road, but all the time they're keeping the high ground, which is their advantage. You see where the land ahead of us, see where that tree is, all the way along here. This is the highest of the ground to give them that advantage over the Yorkists, who have got to walk uphill and exert more energy before the fight. So this is important in those days. Okay, so they would have spread their army out right the way along the ridge here towards that tree, and the Yorkists would have seen them coming up that road from the dip there. They would have seen the Lancastrians taking their positions along the ridge, as it would appear from down there. We'll go down there in a minute and we'll have a look, and then we'll decide what the Yorkists would do faced with a load of men on top of the hill, albeit a not very prominently big hill, but it's big enough. So let's go along a little bit further here, because this is where the historians say that the battle took place, and it didn't. So I'm going to land the helicopter here now, facing the road. Okay, so slowing down. And you can see the road clearly. There wouldn't have been any point in going much further than this. Okay, there we are. We've got all the high ground. They're coming up that road, and all they can see is the Lancastrian army on top of this hill. So maybe I've come a bit too far. They can't really see me now, can they? I'm going to put it down anyway, because this is important. So they've spread out from the campsite over there. They've got all the high ground, and the Yorkists are in the dip. Right, now let's go down and see where the Yorkists are, because that's very important to what they do next. The Yorkists actually won this battle, by the way. Lancastrians were absolutely thrashed. So the road is in exactly the same place as the road was back in the day. Nothing's changed, as I say, apart from tarmac and street lights. So put yourself, because don't forget, armies, when they're travelling, they have horses and they have carts and equipment and things. They don't really want to be going across people's fields unless they have to. They're going to stick rigidly to the road as much as is possible, because that makes life easier. Okay, but now we've got all these soldiers, so I'm going to go just past these buildings here. I'm going to land on the road to give you that perspective, and land just before the power lines. Obviously they weren't there, so anywhere here really. So their scouts that they will have sent on ahead will have said, oh, got old Lancastrian army up ahead, waiting for you. Ambush. Ambush? What? Are you sure? Right, okay, so what do we do next? Let's get on the ground first, and let's make that decision. Okay, here we go. Don't need to put myself right on the road, but near enough to get the perspective. They've got little animated cars that go down the road, and they'll drive right through my helicopter if I'm right on the road. So here's the Yorkist perspective from this army. This is Army A. This is coming up this road, because don't forget, Army B of the Yorkists is coming up the other road off to our right, up the other side of the triangle. So here we are on the ground. Okay, there's the campsite over there. And we're seeing soldiers right the way along the top. So, if I was in charge of the Yorkist army, I'm going to say, right, okay, we know there's a big dip over there to our left. So we're going to go up. We're going to take the high ground, which is off to our right. That's what I'd do. And it's probably not a bad idea. So they will be breaking away from the road and they'll be going uphill. Let's get some high ground here. Now, the one thing that made a very, very big contributory factor to this battle was the wind direction, because the wind was howling from the south. Okay, and you'll see the significance of that in a minute. Right, so the Yorkists are up here and they can now see all the Lancastrian army over there. So it's more likely that any confrontation would have happened from here or further high ground. So there's a village here. So let's go around the village and you'll see what I've discovered. So they could have just formed up and took their positions here to the west of the village of Saxon. Okay, this is where we are now. Or they could have gone to the east of the village of Saxon. So either side's just as good, really. I mean, it depends on the commander at the time. But there's a more significant bit of high ground. So they might have come through the village, because it's only a small village. Circumnavigated the village, because you're still watching those soldiers off to your left. And then we got some high ground just here. So it would have been one of the two places, or both sides even, depending on how big the army was. I've got a bit of high ground just here. And then there's a dip where the road goes. You can see that, and you can see the whole Lancastrian army spread out ahead of us, where the historians claim the battle did actually take place. But I think it took place here, and I'll show you why. Because these have got a nice little hill here. I'm going to put the helicopter down to show you the hill. And then we can see. Now there's the crossroads ahead of us. Now Army B is coming up from the right. But we can't see Army B. Army B is not come into sight yet. Okay, so the Lancastrians don't know Army B is there. Closing in. So I reckon they get to this point. Careful, careful. Don't crash, I've started the video again. Ugh. Oh, bollocks. Okay, part 2. Breaks off. Now I shall get back to where we were and I shall resume the story. We don't know what the wind's doing at the moment. Okay. Okay, so here we are. This is the east side of the village of Saxon. Okay, and as you can see, we're on a bit of high ground here. So the army could spread. It could just remain on the other side of Saxon, or it could have spread to this side, or we could be on both sides. But I think it's more likely that they came here because they're getting a good look at the situation. Because they'd want to see it from both sides and decide what they're going to do. So I think the army was here. This is the Yorkist army. And they would have been on the top of this, albeit not a very big hill. Okay, now you can't see the road on the right from here. Okay, but you can see the Lancastrian army spread out on the top of that hill in front of us. Okay, and they're commanding the high ground. Now when the battle starts, as I said, the wind was howling from the south, which means it's behind us as we're looking now. So the first thing these armies did when they came into battle was they started firing arrows at each other. Okay, so if I've got the wind behind me and I'm firing arrows, my army is firing arrows up into the wind. The arrows will carry further in the wind than the Lancastrians who are firing their arrows into the wind. Excuse me, into the wind. So the Yorkist arrows went further and started cutting into the ranks of the Lancastrians. So let's go back up to the Lancastrian position. And I reckon they're on this ridge. That's where I'd be if I was the Yorkists. I'd be on this ridge. My army would be on the ridge because I'd want the high ground advantage and hoping the Lancastrians are going to come to me. I don't want to go up that hill towards them. Even now I've got the wind behind me, which that's a huge advantage. Now look at these trees. Check these trees out on Google Earth. It's in the middle of a ploughed field, the big squares. These are the mass graves. Now I know for a fact battles, when you have you're cleaning up after a battle, you don't take the bodies miles, you bury them where they fell. And that's why I reckon those trees there are the mass graves. Right, I'm going to settle down now on the highest point. See, that tree is there pretty much. Okay. Because it's all a matter of perspective. You've actually got to go there. And that's the beauty of the Battle of Towton, because the terrain hasn't really changed. You know, there may have been some erosion, soil erosion, due to ploughing over 500 years, but that's about it. Other than that, you can see where the encampment was over there. No, it came right over here on the high ground. You probably got them stretched out from the road around the back of the village of Saxon, and they're onto that high ground at the back of the village. So this is where the Lancastrians are. They don't want to move forward because they're on the top of the high ground, they're on top of the hill. So they want the Yorkists to come up this hill to fight them. But here's the thing. My arrows, the Lancastrian arrows, are not reaching because I'm firing them into the wind. And they're staying put on top of the high ground. But their arrows are cutting into my men. So I've got to make a decision. Do I just sit here and lose more and more men? Or what? Do I run away? Or do I get tucked in? Do we go into the fight? We've got to get closer for our arrows to reach them into the wind. And don't forget, it's freezing cold, it's snowing as well. So that's what they did. They advanced down this hill, wanting to keep as much of the high ground in their favour as possible. Okay, so they start advancing down the hill until their arrows get in range, but by this time more and more of their men are getting cut down by the Yorkist arrows. You can see the high ground there ahead of us. So slowly coming down this hill, and I think the majority of the fighting took place where these trees are. That's where they actually charged each other and had hand-to-hand combat with swords and hammers and spears and things, because it was reported to have been a massive battle, massive casualties. And as I said, they're not going to carry the bodies very far, they're going to bury them. And these are farmers' fields, this is agricultural land. So they would have buried the mass graves here, buried all the bodies, farmers would have marked them with trees. And over the years, the trees have multiplied. But they've marked them particularly because they don't want to plough up the bodies, do they? But otherwise, you know, the locals would have just chopped these trees down and burned them to keep warm in the winter, wouldn't they? Okay, so I'm going to land here because my guess is that this is where the fighting took place, the hand-to-hand, because they're well within arrow range of each other at this point, and you get to a point where you run out of arrows and you just charge in and start scrapping and fighting. And don't forget, they're not beaten yet, the Lancastrians, until they're all here fighting away. Round that corner down there, see where the crossroads is? That's where Army B comes round the corner. Suddenly they can see there's a big battle going on here, and so they come charging across here to join in, all fresh men. They're not tired at all, and so the Lancastrians go, oh shit, we're outnumbered, look, that's coming in. And this is where the rout came in. If you read up on the Battle of Towton, there was a rout. In other words, what you do if there's an army coming from that direction, you run in that direction. Which is obvious, isn't it? I mean, that's perfectly obvious to me. So they all thought, shit, big army coming from over there. We're all knackered. Half of us are dead. We're going to run away. As in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So this is what happened, right? I'm going to follow that route. And afterwards, as I said, they buried most of the people here because this is where the main battle took place. So they turn away and they ran away. Now, as the story goes, now I'm running away directly 180 degrees from the direction of those soldiers coming running in, so they would have been pursued up this hill. Okay, they're all screaming, run away, ah! So I'm looking behind me, yeah, so they're running uphill again now, being pursued, which isn't good. So they'll be dropping armour and swords and all kinds. So metal detectors just here would be a good one. And they're just running away from the enemy army back towards the encampment, look, where they were the night before. Okay, and they're running across this ground, and they're in open ground. They're being pursued by cavalry and stuff, and they're going to get cut down. They're going to get shredded. They've got nowhere to go, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and they think, I know, because they were here the night before. We'll make it to that dip, which is down to Cockbeck. This was called the rout. They were all routed from here, and if they could make it to this fall, bit of a dip, they might be able to get away. And this is it. This is where they went, and they came down this dip here, and there's a river at the bottom, and it was reported that loads of them drowned in this river trying to get away, and the Yorkist soldiers pursued them and cut them all down, and this river down here was just full of bodies, and this was the rout. Okay, I dare say some of them got away, but others didn't. Now this river ends up in the River Ouse eventually, but it must flow downhill. So there was loads and loads of dead bodies here, and the battle was over. The army had run away, it had been cut down, and the ones that were surviving were trying to get away, leaving footprints in the snow, and they would be exhausted at this stage. And this is where they all finished up getting bumped off. So I'm going to end the story at Towton itself, because the story started there. We'll just take a run back. You can see where they ran to. This is just near where they were camped, so they would be familiar with the terrain down there. And the rest of it's all open and flat, so they've got no chance of getting away, have they, from horses? So I'll go back to this, which is where I think the mass grave is. Now, if you, like I say, if you look at it on Google Earth, it's obvious that that's where it is, because there's just no reason for those woods to be there. And they deliberately left them alone and ploughed around them because they are mass graves. Okay, that is, and there's only one way to find out. Let's do a bit of archaeology there, and I think you'll very soon find what you're looking for. If the battle was as big as history says it was, they had to be buried somewhere, and that would also account for noblemen being buried in the church there, because it's not far away. We could have put them on a cart and buried them there. So there's two big squarish woods which are totally out of character, just right there. And this dip here is where I believe the battle was fought, according to my helicopter research anyway. So I'm going to end the video back at the manor house in Towton, where the graves were unearthed, because we'll take another view from the road where the Army B came around the corner and realised the fighting was going on, and then joined in from that direction. Because the historians have got most of it right, you know, they know all these things. They just didn't really know where the actual battle was, unless they've deliberately said that to throw people off the scent and go desecrating the mass graves, because they would have thrown everything down the hole with them. I would have imagined that they couldn't carry. They kept all the best bits, of course. Right, so that army came up this road here, and there's a bit of high ground underneath us, which would have shielded the view of the battle. And I'm going to fly as low as I can up this road. Don't like throwing helicopters around too much because I'm not that good. I don't want to bend it. Okay, if I can get this point made, that it was at this point that the army can see up to the trees that there is a battle taking place there, and they've gone, whoa, right, go, 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 go. And they've advanced towards the battleground from this direction. Lancastrians have gone, no, run away. And they've run back to, you can see the direction they're running. Because they're running back towards relative safety, but there's no point in running straight up the hill because there's nothing there, it's all flat. So they've obviously wanted to get back to Cockbeck. This is the battle site, this is where the mass graves are, where the trees are, and they've run up the hill in this direction. Run down to the river Cockbeck, which is where loads of them were slaughtered. They couldn't get across the river, loads of them fell in the river. People were climbing over bodies in the river, and it was reported, as the story went, there was loads and loads of dead people in the river. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least, because they're being chased across open ground. They must have been absolutely exhausted. If I ran across here, even when I was young and fit, in a pair of trainers and some shorts, I'm sure if I ran as fast as my legs had carried me, I'd be absolutely exhausted by the time I got to Cockbeck, which is just here. And they would have used the downhill to help them, so they probably would have gone more over this way, or they could have just gone straight on. Not really, there's no golden rule, is there? But you know, going downhill helps you go faster, for sure. And they're being pursued by men on horses with huge axes and swords and things. It must have been absolutely terrifying. Okay, and then the ones that made it this far without being cut down, ran down that hill and came stuck, unstuck in the river there, or stuck, I should say. I don't know. So this is it, and this terrain has not changed. So the bodies that were slaughtered are now down in a ditch, down by a river. Battle's over. Yorkists have won the battle. Lancastrians have scarpered, and the ones that got away, but most of them are dead, and there are more here. So if you were a servant, you would have been given the task of recovering these bodies. And what would you have done with the bodies? Lots of them are floating in the river. So lots of them have been cut down just here, and there's bodies all over the place. What do you do? Do you get a horse and a cart and drag it across these fields? No, you throw all the bodies in a river. That's what I'd do, because they'll float, won't they? And they'll go downstream, because it's very cold. And so what I would do is I'd float them downstream until we got to the bridge where there's a road, and I'd have a cart there on the road, and what we'd do is we'd have some sort of means of stopping the bodies going under the bridge and pulling them out of the river there, haul them up the bank and onto the back of the cart. This is pure speculation on my behalf now as to how they got there, but you'd float the bodies. It's a lot easier putting bodies in the water and floating them downriver, isn't it, than carrying them, for goodness sake. So you follow that river down around here, and they will come eventually to a road with a bridge over it. That's what we're looking for. And then they'll put them on the back of the cart and taken them into the village of Towton to bury them somewhere. Where do you want to bury them, boss? Oh, I don't know. How's about over here? So there'll be. I'm looking for a road now. And the bridge. There's got to be one here somewhere. So it's a long way to be carrying bodies, and you haven't got a road. It's going to be quite a major task, isn't it? So I'm just following where I'm thinking the river's going. There's a road. There's a road. So, and they had bridges, you know, in those days, so the river will have gone under the bridge. This is where they'll have put them on the cart and taken them to the village, which is, where's the village from here? It's over there somewhere. Yeah, there'll have been an old road there, I'm sure. And this will be the village of Towton. They wouldn't have taken very far from the bridge, they'll just come along this lane, the old lane. And there wouldn't have been all these houses here, there'd have probably just been the manor house. And said to the dude in the manor house, "Oh, here, Ross, what you want me to do to these buddies?" They don't talk like that in Yorkshire, do they? He said, "I'll just dig a hole and bury him here." Well, that'll do. All these butchered people with all their limbs hacked and heads crushed and things. And yeah, when they exhumed the bodies, it was in this manor house just here. See, this must have been an old road. Or that one, I don't know. You'd have to look at it on Google Earth and see if you can figure out which route they took. But this manor house, the black one there, this is where they would have brought the bodies. And like I said, the whole battlefield was down that way. So I'm going to end here. I'm going to go to Rockingham Arms and have a beer. So that's my explanation anyway of the Battle of Towton. This is the manor house. And like I said, they were doing some building, I think, extending the building or whatever. And they dug up all these skeletons. And they went, ooh, must have been from the Battle of Towton. 1461, exactly 500 years before I was born. Brakes on. Thanks for watching.